everybody. It is Jordan. Hi, this is me, Jordan speaking. Wednesday Night Warhammer. There's no bugs this time, but there is my friend Charlie here.
What's up, guys? How you doing?
Charlie's super excited about the Agents of Imperium for multiple good reasons, and he really wanted to hang out, and I really wanted to hang out and see what's really good with them. So we decided we're gonna make a tier list. Here's all of the agents, and here is Charlie. What are you thinking about the Kodaz right here?
Right. So, but before we jump in, just as
you're right. I'm too excited.
Yeah, I mean, I am too. I'm real looking forward to it. But just to lay for what my frame of reference is for making the tier list. This is a pure agents, not counting allies. Like how I would rate them as allies is a completely different metric. Obviously, we have different points and all that.
Which is really interesting.
This is a this is like from a internal balance perspective of like what units you're likely to see if you're playing agents solo as an army. I've played I want to say maybe 5 or 6 games at this point on Tabletop Simulator, and I'm getting an army ready to take to a GT in a couple weeks. So I'm really eager about it. I'm really enjoying playing them. It's been a lot of fun, and I've found that they actually have a decent amount more play than it seemed like they did at first. So, but yeah, I'm super excited. We can jump right into it.
Yeah, that's pretty sweet. So, just thinking on the codex, you're not playing Dark Angels and 1 or 2 squads from this codex. You are Agents of the Imperium, and that's why
yes, Agents of the Imperium. And this is so I'm actually even planning on agents with no knight allies. I'm going full pure 2,000 points of Imperial Agents. No Canis, no. I'm a Canis hater for agents.
Oh my gosh.
Very good with them. Yeah.
I feel like a lot of people are Canis Rex haters, but that's mostly when they're playing against Canis Rex.
Usually, right? Usually. But I can talk about that a little bit. The reason why I don't love him with Agents Pure, and we can talk about that more when we do like a look at the codex, is it kind of like gives your opponent a target for all their anti-tank weapons, and it's right. Like you lose a lot of value with where he can be and like what kind of threat he can pose. But
absolutely.
Anyway, that's for another video.
Yes, Kodaz
Assassin. So I mean, we can put this one up in S tier. I think it's easily the unilaterally like strongest across the board into every army, just because her ability is always going to be meaningful, right? Like every army you play against wants to be spending CP. She has the up and down mechanic, which is really strong for scoring secondaries, especially in the Pariah Nexus meta where you need cheap units to be able to like go and do something somewhere, and being on a 32 millimeter base makes it really easy to fit in those like little corners for whatever it is you need to do without sacrificing like a damage piece, right?
Yep.
And then the new Agents of Vectora is just crazy. Like armies just don't have the resources to manage spending an extra 1 or 2 CP on like a commit turn.
Yeah. What I think is a really good point on the Kodaz is she has deep strike, right?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay, so she has deep strike, which that means you only have to be 9 inches away, but her aura is like 12 inches.
Yes.
So honestly, if you're able to rapid ingress or deep strike a Kodaz in a really kind of cheeky way, you can really mess up your opponent.
Oh, absolutely. 100%. The rapid ingress is it can be devastating, right? Especially, or even into one of the things I love thinking about is like you're playing into Eldar, right? If they set up, especially a lot of Eldar players like Quentin now, they're starting to look at the Wraith Guard again.
Oh no,
Kodaz comes up, right? But it's terrible, but it is, this is the meta we're living in. But you have to fire and fade or phantasm. You have all these stratagems that you want to be dumping into this unit to let them be, hitting over and over, for 3 or 4 turns before they come out and commit and like hit your opponent full force. Having the Kodaz, I mean, with a deep strike rapid ingress or even just dropping in and running forward, or just starting on the table and running forward. It's your opponent is in like a really bad situation now, where it's like, well, you can either fire and fade right now, or you can phantasm later.
Right.
And like those are your options, you know. So now it's like, do you really want to like push them out? And then it's like, what are you really gaining from, like, what are you shooting at with that squad? Where are you putting them that's gonna. So I think the Calidus is an obvious S tier choice. She's just a great
Absolutely.
utility piece. She got better than she was before, and she didn't go up in cost. So I mean,
Yeah. There's a couple of assassins in here that are like 40 points higher than her, and I just think it is ridiculous. But we can.
Yeah, no, nobody expected the 150 point Vindicare as an ally.
But
It's, you know, it's something.
yeah, it's crazy. But certainly, if we're judging by how cool units are, Calidus will have a neighbor, correct?
Yeah. Well, yeah, if we're going on cool factor, yeah, Calidus gets a neighbor, but
Corvus
unfortunately that's
Blackstar.
yeah, unfortunately that's not the metric we're looking at. I mean, there's not really much to say other than straight to D tier. I almost want to put it in C for Corvus, but it's D tier.
Is it
It's
really
bad.
that bad?
It is. I mean, so there's a few things it has going for it, right? It has 14 wounds, 3 up save, stealth. So it has some, you know, defense. It's not as defensive as it used to be because you lost access to AOC, as you know, you're not in the Deathwatch detachment anymore. But yeah, man, I mean, it really just doesn't do anything, right? Like you look at it, you look at its guns, and they're all really underwhelming. You get like a twin last cannon and 2
Yeah.
3 damage rockets and like a hurricane bolter. So you're paying a pretty heavy points premium for a unit that can't do any actions, has 0 OC.
I knew it was bad when
Yeah.
when you were like, it's not terrible. And then you immediately started to go into how many wounds and what an armor save was.
Yeah, yeah. There's like, that's the only really good thing you say about it. It's not going to do any damage really. It's 180 points still as well. So
Yeah.
it's real expensive. Like if you're looking for a transport for your Deathwatch, like you're better just to take one of the Imperial Rhinos. They're less than half the cost, and they're significantly smaller, so you can actually hide them, and they're fast them where they need to be. So they're like, the Corvus Blackstar is not even competing in the space where you need a transport, because you have the Imperial Rhino that you can put them in instead. So I really don't think there's any compelling reason to put this in a list. It's just bad.
Dang. So straight to dumpster tier. Sorry.
Straight to dumpster tier. I just don't think in the limited selection of data sheets you have, you can't afford to spend, you know, almost 200 points on one that's not going to do anything.
Yikes. All right. This guy that has a motorcycle engine on his head.
Yeah. So motorcycle engine head. He's zooming his way straight to A tier, I think.
Oh, man.
Yeah. So I really like all of the assassins.
And for people who are just
Situational.
listening, we're talking about the Culexus Assassin.
Yes. Yeah. Culexus Assassin. I wouldn't put him in A tier if the assassins didn't gain the new rule that lets you swap them out at the table before the game. I think that automatically like makes him a legitimate choice, because there's some matchups where he's just kind of phenomenal. Grey Knights, Thousand Suns, he can be really good into Tyranids as well, with, you know, depending on the list they have, how many Psychers they're putting on the table.
Right. Yeah, I'm seeing that.
And even just outside of the psychic heavy matchups where you're dropping in and doing the, you know, big -2 battle shock aura, he has a 3-inch deep strike, which is, I mean, that's just a phenomenal ability on a 32 millimeter base, dropping in 3 inches away from deep strike. He has lone op, you know, he's just like has good rules that have utility on top of really good extras into
Right.
psychic armies. Um it's really funny. The math on him, he kills a Grey Knight Dread Knight on average between shooting, fighting, and a grenade strat. It's
Wow.
which I think is just really funny.
That's
Yeah.
pretty funny. That's pretty good. I'm about it for A tier.
Yeah. Yeah.
The thing, and we might get into it a little bit more. The thing that I'm worried about with agents is I think they're really good scoring pieces, but like all their scoring pieces, and maybe I'm wrong, is like 100 points for each of these
Yeah.
assassins.
Yeah. So and that is one of the things that is a little unfortunate is a lot of your units are like 100, but you don't have anything really cheaper than that aside from like the Voidsmen. And the Voidsmen do kind of fill that role as like a cheaper unit for like 50 points to go and score and do something, and you're not really caring about them trying to do anything else.
Right.
But other than that, you are investing like a decent amount points wise in order to do the things, like 3-inch deep strike, a Culexus in your opponent's deployment zone for behind, and Locust, something like that.
Yeah.
But I mean, so far, I haven't found it to be enough of a problem in my games.
Okay.
And before we got the points, I was even playing with just as, like a, nerfing myself so that I wasn't like playing with something that ended up actually being better than what they really were in reality. And I was finding them to perform well. And then I got an extra 150 points in my list
Wow.
when the MFM came out. Yeah.
Incredible. Yeah, that must have
Yeah.
felt really good.
It did. Yeah, it was like just a couple free extra units that I was like, man, it'd be really great if I had these,
Nice, nice. So we got Kodaz so far in S, the Culexus in
Mhm.
A, and then we don't have to talk about the Blackstar.
Don't have to talk about this. Terrible. It's
Next up
so far
is
down there.
Deathwatch, right?
Yes,
Deathwatch Guilty.
Deathwatch better. Yes. So this is another unit that, again, looking at the army internally, talking about things that you're almost certainly going to be taking in the army, I think they have to go in S tier. They're
Really?
yeah. No, again, if you're looking at it like in a vacuum, they're not like a unit, but in the context of the army for things that you have to take in order for the army to function, I think they have to be in S tier. Um, the Thunderhammers that you get in the squad are legitimately in super strong. An Imperialis fleet having access to the 6-inch reactive move to be able to like jump out, hit something, and get back in a transport. They're the thing that I've been leaning on the most to go and kill something when something needs to die. Is like, okay, Deathwatch veterans, go and do that job. They have the rerolls built in natively. You have the +1 to hit you can pick from the Imperialis fleet detachment, which I think is the best way to play the army solo. There's I don't think there's a way to play the army by itself without including them,
Right.
where you can realistically like threaten to trade with your opponent,
Yeah.
and they're cheap enough that they can actually trade up.
How many points are they? Like 200 or
200 for 10, just an
okay.
even 200 for 10, 20 points a model, and you get 4 hammers. So the way I like to run them, I think they're best with 4 hammers. You go 2 heavy bolters, 2 frag cannons, and 2 storm shields in each squad, and then you have the random devastating wounds sword on the sergeant, and then like a power weapon.
Oh man, I didn't
They
realize that Deathwatch got the 3 damage Thunderhammer back.
Yes, yeah. So they're strength 10, AP 2, flat 3 damage. With dev
Sheesh.
wounds, they have the native rerolls built in. They and when you put the 2 frag cannons and 2 Infernus heavy bolters in there, they actually become kind of a legitimate shooting threat as well. And
Yeah.
something else that's really nice, this codex, you're basically dripping in the grenade keyword everywhere. Almost every unit in the book has the grenades keyword. So you're almost every turn you're throwing a grenade out somewhere, and Deathwatch veterans are no exception. They also still have the grenades keyword. So between grenades, the extra heavy bolter shots, the frag cannon shots, like they'll run out, they'll shoot like a small trash skirmish unit to death, and then they'll go punch something bigger to death. Like they hit legitimately hard.
Nice. Yeah, yeah. They sound like you're probably running 3x10. I'm assuming.
So I was initially, but I'm down to 2x10 and then 2x5. I really like the
Oh, are
5.
they're
Yeah,
battle line?
they are battle line. Yeah, and they're OC2. So like they good stats. They're battle line OC2. You know, the in Imperialis fleet, the 5-man units are great targets for the infiltrate from the enhancement. Because they're really low investment. You're paying 100 points for something that can trade up pretty easily. And it's still like a legitimate threat to a lot of your opponent's units. They have to respect them, but it's like it's only 100 points. So you send them out, they go, they do something, maybe even if it's just scoring points and then they die, but they, you know, better than infiltrating the 10-man squad, which can get caught out and die.
Yeah, then that's a tough use of points.
Right,
But
right, exactly.
Nice. So moving on, our next assassin, this is the Eversor, correct?
Yeah, the Eversor. I think we also got to put him. It's a tough call. I'm stuck between S and A, either top of A or like bottom of S tier. He is legitimately really strong. He hits really hard. He's super fast. I think he's really cool. I think he's better than the Culexus for sure. Because I think he's more useful in more matchups. He kind of forces your opponent to move correctly, and if they don't, you can really take advantage of it with like putting him somewhere to go kill something important, like Asriel in an Inner Circle Companions unit. You know, your opponent is expecting to get 5 CP off that Asriel over the course of the game, but you know, now the Eversor went and did his job, and you're 5 CP short on what your plan was.
Which is very cool because like at the
Yes.
baseline, all of these people are assassins, and like an
Yeah.
assassin that can actually go out and kill a character pretty easily. Like his
Oh yeah.
melee profile looks disgusting.
It's nasty. Yeah. The only like characters that he doesn't want to go hit are characters with a 2-up save and AOC.
Right.
Because it just gets really swingy of whether or not you actually convert the damage through. But I think he settles. I think he settles in A tier ultimately because he doesn't have the up and down like the Calidus, which I think makes her a little better for scoring. But he does have a 15-inch normal move. But I think he ends up top of A tier for me.
I like that. I like that too. Awesome. So moving on. So this is on my bad. A lot of the agents of the Imperium pictures are very similar / the same. So Charlie's gonna help us and walk us through which each of these units are. I think we talked about it before, right?
Yes, yeah. So I think we'll start with the Exaction Squad here.
Exaction Squad. Okay.
So I think the Exaction Squad ends up in C tier. They don't do a whole lot, especially for the cost that they are. They have like ignores cover on their ranged weapons, which is not really interesting. They have like a grenade and a Weber, and then like a bunch of random AP0 guns.
Right.
And everything hits on 4s, so that's not super interesting. They have the same rule as like the Prute kill team, where you pick a unit and get lethal hits and precision against them.
Yeah, but
You
if
know,
your weapons don't do anything already, then
exactly. And so the big thing that I don't like about them is compared to the next squad, which is the Vigilant Squad, which I think end up in B tier. Is their OC1 and they're not battle line on the Exaction Squad.
ooh, yikes.
So
that's
yeah, yeah, and I don't like the cost for low OC, especially in this army. A lot of what you're trying to do is like win the game through holding objectives and like beating your opponent on points, and so I don't love like paying those points for 100 point or for OC1. The one thing that I do say that I like about this squad is they have the med kit, so they resurrect D3 guys in the command phase, and that does let you do some interesting things where you like poke out onto an objective from behind a wall, and then opponent shoots and kills a couple of them, and then you res back onto the point and still score it. but they're not particularly durable, and I think it's pretty likely that your opponent could just still either shoot them full to dead in one go, or put something on put like a single OC2 body on the point, and now it's like you have to, even if you resurrect all 3 models with coherency, you're probably not taking the point back. So I think it's like an interesting idea, but I think your opponent has a lot of ways to try and play around that, and so I don't think ultimately it ends up being that impactful in a lot of cases.
Right.
Especially with this army, like your opponent in a lot of situations isn't going to be scared to go put something in a place because their damage isn't especially high.
Yeah.
But the Vigilant squad, on the other hand, I think I put them in B tier just because they're OC2 and their battle line, they're pretty cheap. I like OC2 in this army. I think it goes a long way, especially with the acquire at all costs, I believe it's called, from the first half of the Imperialis fleet detachment, where you can make them OC3.
That's pretty good.
OC3 bodies, or potentially OC3 bodies, they're so huge for flipping objectives and holding points. I don't think you end up seeing them super often in your lists, but I think they're better than the exaction squads for the extra OC that they have.
Yep. And their battle line, which those are 2 huge
and their
points
battle line.
that I think definitely
yes.
take it. So next up, we've got guys that aren't supposed to be here, right?
Guys, they're not supposed to be here, but the Inquisitors found some money in their back pocket, and they said, you know what, let's throw some change at these guys, and they'll join us on the crusade.
So the Grey Knights Terminators. I'm very curious as to what you think about these guys.
Yeah, so just some things to cover. Outside of Grey Knights, they don't have the Auto 6 Advance, they don't have AOC, they can't up and down. So you lose a lot of the utility that you get from them being Grey Knights, but they are cheaper in pure agents. They're 20 points cheaper for 5 than you would pay in Grey Knights. Okay. They are squad locked to 5 models, so you can't run a big 10-man squad, but you still get access to the apothecary, you still get the banner, you still get all the options you get in a 5-man squad. And I mean, to be honest, I really like them.
Okay.
I have had a hard time fitting them into any of my lists.
Right.
But they're OC3 natively with the banner. They still get lethal hits when they charge, so they have a legitimate, melee threat that your opponent can't just ignore. They still resurrect a destroyed model in the command phase, and as opposed to the exaction squad where the idea would be like to sit behind a wall and res back onto the point, these guys are still pretty durable. T5, 2-up armor, 4-up inmol, and you can drop down and sit them on a point in the open. Your opponent might not kill them, and then bam, I still have 3 Terminators on this point after resing, and I still have 9 or 12 OC on it.
It's pretty annoying.
Yeah, so I think they also end up in B tier, better than the Vigilant squad. Legitimately durable. I think they're really good, and they give if you put an Inquisitor in the squad with them, the Inquisitor gains the deep strike ability, so you can still deep strike the whole unit. And if you're playing Imperialis fleet, that lets you use your 6-inch reactive move, which can let you do some really funky things with like rapid ingress somewhere that your opponent can see them, and then they shoot at them and use the 6-inch move to go, stand somewhere that's a little more important. It lets you do some really interesting things.
Yeah, that's pretty sweet.
Yeah, I legitimately I do like them very, very much. I'm just, the only thing is I'm having a hard time finding the points to fit them in my lists.
How many are they for one squad?
190 for 5.
Oh man, Charlie, you could get a Corvus Blackstar for that.
I could get a Corvus Blackstar for that price point. I don't know what's the conversation here. We're going Corvus every time.
How do we feel about the Immolator?
Immolator in Imperial Agents, I actually pretty down on it, to be honest. I'm gonna put it in pure agents. I'm gonna put it in C tier above the exaction squad. this army isn't really looking for ignores cover on a bunch of its guns all the time. The main air quotes shooting unit that you have is going to be the Imperial Navy breachers, and they have a once per game ignore cover when they shoot anyways, like built into their data sheet. So it's not really something that you're looking for. And the other problem is if you're taking them, that means you also have to take a unit of Battle Sisters. So in order to, put something in it so it doesn't just die at the start of the game. So now you're looking at minimum 200-point investment for a twin multi-melta and a ignores cover rule that, that'll matter sometimes.
Yeah, it
So
does not sound like the best.
yeah, it doesn't really spark joy, really.
Which I think is actually a good point, because I feel like there's a small chance that if GW messes up a little bit and some of these data sheets are good, like Grey Knight Terminators aren't seen everywhere, but like if somehow they became better in Agents of Imperium than they are in Grey Knights, then everybody just is playing Grey Knights light with Agents of Imperium. Or on the other hand, if Immolators with Battle Sisters all of a sudden unlocked this broken combo, then that would also be annoying. So I do appreciate, and I almost like that these other like faction dipping units do feel like they've lost a little bit because they're not with with all of their homies,
Yeah, exactly. They're just missing their friends. They wanna go back home.
But you had a great little sneak peek into what you think is probably a good unit, these Navy breachers.
Yeah, so once again, looking at units that you're going to be putting in your army, I'm going to put them top of A tier.
Okay.
Above the Eversor, the Imperial Navy breachers. They're just going to be a staple unit in pretty much every one of your lists if you for running pure agents. Once again, their battle line, their OC2, they have grenades keyword, and once a game they get to grenade 18 inches away, which has some pretty funny implications, especially since they can do it even against lone operatives. So that gives you some interesting plays you can do there. They have some actually interesting war gear options. You have like a random melta-gun in the squad. And they have their datasheet ability is one of the strongest datasheet abilities, I think, in the whole list of units here. Is they have reroll ones to wound natively and full rerolls to wound against units on objectives, which doesn't sound like a lot, but there's like a number of stratagems that, when you're talking about random last guns and stuff, there's a number of stratagems and rules you can layer on them that take their like random shotguns from being like, oh, whatever, random shotguns, to being like, oh, what that this like hurts all of a sudden. What's happening?
Yeah. Man, and they're 90 points for 10 man and their battle line.
And their battle line and their OC2. They have the smoke keyword. There's like a random 4-up invulnerable save baked into the squad. Of course, if you have a character leading them, you can give them a reactive 4-up invulnerable save. They have the Voidfarers keyword, which means you can deep strike them with an enhancement, or you can give them the +1 strength, +1 AP with all their guns if you're shooting a unit within 12 inches. And that all those buffs, including the full rerolls to wound, also transfers to any characters that are leading them. And I don't want to spoil anything, but we got a certain Inquisitor with a couple guns coming up that really likes to be in this squad.
Incredible. Awesome.
Yeah.
So yeah, I would agree with that. I think I was expecting them to be a little bit more than 90 in that, but that's sweet.
Yeah.
Next up, I'm sure we have a staple, right? The Imperial Rhino.
Yeah, the Imperial Rhino. It goes in A tier, somewhere in the middle. It's a Rhino with a 100 killer missile. You know what? Well, really, it's 75 points. It's a Rhino. Put your guys in it, keeps them safe, and it has extra value in Imperial Agents, because if we're talking about the Imperialis fleet, which I think is the only real way to talk about the army, you can use the reactive move strats to get back in the Rhinos, which lets you make trades, and especially if in a lot of the GW missions, you can stage up a Rhino like behind a wall in the middle of the table where you have a lot of room to go out and hit your opponent. And then they go to shoot you back, and you get to use your reactive move to go back into the Rhino behind the wall to keep the unit for like another turn to go out and hit again.
It's build your own fire and fade, man.
Yeah, exactly.
That's pretty sweet.
Build your own, and I think they just give so much utility, and you can put any agents of the Imperium unit, and this will be FAQ'd, obviously. Currently, you can literally put any agents of the Imperium units in the Rhino, so you can put Rhinos inside the Rhino.
Charlie,
Obviously,
you know what we have to do then. Corvus Blackstar inside
Corvus
a Rhino.
Blackstar in the Rhino. I've thought about it. You do a Corvus Blackstar inside of a Rhino, inside of another Rhino. It's the
incredible
Russian nesting doll.
Yeah. You know what's twice as good as a Corvus Blackstar inside of a Rhino?
Is it 2 Corvus Blackstars inside of a Rhino?
Nope, it's a bird with 2 heads, Charlie. Where are we putting this guy?
Inquisitor Kodaz. Once again, his datasheet rule is ignores cover, which is not something that I'm really looking for.
Right.
He also gives an invulnerable save to his unit, which again, if we're talking about the Imperialis fleet, you have a reactive 4-up invulnerable save. So, having him would obviously let you have the invuln on another squad, but I just don't see a ton of value in it. His gun also took some like random nerfs that make it pretty insignificant.
Yeah, and also the invuln is just a 6-up, so it's not like...
Yeah, and it's only a 4-up against demons and psychic attacks,
right.
So, really, depending on what you're playing against, could not even matter. He is strength 9 AP3 flat 3 damage in combat, which is legitimate. I have thought about genuinely running him in an Imperial or in a Deathwatch veterans team, like in a little 5-man, and pinging him and the squad he's leading with the infiltrate enhancement. So you have 9 from this like little cheap squad. You have 9 attacks of flat 3 damage.
Can he lead the Deathwatch team?
I believe, yeah, he can lead any Imperium battle line.
Oh, okay. I missed that part.
Yeah, and they are Imperium battle line. Yep.
Nice.
So that's and he gives them rear ones to hit or 4 rolls to hit against Xenos. So like, it's an extra 3 flat 3 damage attacks in combat. Like it's not terrible.
It just kind of sounds like he does cool stuff, but none of the cool stuff that you really want.
Yeah. This thing, he does a job, and he does a job pretty well. It's just not something that I really care about for my list. So I think he ends up in C tier. For that, I just don't think I'm really ever gonna. And so the other thing he does have that is worth talking about, he has anytime your opponent gets a CP from an ability, you gain a CP on a 2-up. There's a couple other data sheets in here that I think make that ability a little less relevant, and we'll get to that as we get there.
Nice.
But yeah, next up we have Inquisitor Draxis. Slam the homie. She goes straight into S tier. She's spectacularly good. She still shoots just unreasonably harder than any one of the other Inquisitors. She lost indirect fire, which is sometimes it was nice to have, but to be honest, I'm not like super broken up about it. But in Imperialis fleet, you can have her with ignores cover, +1 strength and AP on all of her guns, and full rerolls to wound against units on objectives, and +1 to hit. Like she rocks up and points at something, and it just kind of disappears.
Yeah, that's pretty impressive.
Especially if we're looking at her. There's even another world where you sustained hits to her dev wound pistol. you won't often do it, but it's possible. And then you have the full rerolls to wound on the back end with the anti-infantry 4-up and dev wounds. Like she can walk up to an infantry squad and legitimately just pump like 6 or 8 dev wounds into them if all the circumstances are right. On top of whatever other damage she's doing. So I really like her for that. And the +1 strength, +1 AP with ignores cover pushes her main 6-shot attack to a strength 7, which is a big breakpoint for to let her legitimately threaten toughness 12 targets.
Yep.
With the full rolls to wounds, like against knights, for example, if you got a big knight sitting on an objective, she can get up within 12 inches of him. Suddenly, you hand the knight player like 5 or 6 saves at AP1 that are damage 2, and suddenly they're not as confident about, oh, this isn't gonna do anything. But now it's looking a little scary.
Could be a little tough.
Yeah.
Nice. Awesome. Yeah. And also, I can't help but notice you forgot to mention she's got a little dragon guy too. So
She does. And the little dragon guy, big plus. And she also just, at the same time that she's doing all this other crazy damage, she also just gives her unit 18-inch loan up in the command phase.
Yep. I mean, that's why Custodians runner, right?
Yeah. Yeah. That and the forward rolls to wound double shoot. Like, again, it's just all the same reasons that you run her with the Navy Breachers is all the same reasons you run her with Custodes.
Absolutely. She seems pretty tough.
Yeah.
Now, Greyfax, right?
So, as much as I love Draxis, is as much as I really really do not love Greyfax.
Oh no.
The Corvus Blackstar is looking a little lonely down there in D tier. So I think we need to give her a buddy. Yeah, there's nothing that she does that I'm interested in.
Is she really that bad?
Yeah, I mean, she's more expensive than the basic Inquisitor, which I rate actually is quite a good data sheet, and we'll get to that one next. She's more expensive and she does less. Like, she gives her unit anti-psyker 4+.
Ugh.
Yeah, which does not matter, except so the only situation that I think that is interesting is if we're talking about, or no, because it's only ranged weapons. Never mind. I was going to say it would be interesting with Deathwatch veterans because you could make the hammers anti-psyker 4-ups, like into some armies. Like, sure, cool. You have dev wounds on 4-ups with the hammers, but it's only ranged weapons. She only gives ranged weapons anti-psyker 4-up. And so there's nothing interesting about that. She used to force desperate escape tests on enemy units. That rule was replaced with one of the bad rules that's like you get +1 to hit and +1 to wound against units that are half strength or understarting, whatever one of those ones is. So she just doesn't do anything. I think she's legitimately a
tough sell.
Yeah, tough sell. The she's better than the Blackstar because she's a model with OC. That's that's
yeah, but Blackstar is so cool.
Yeah,
just the straight up Inquisitor. How are we feeling
straight
about
up
those
Inquisitor?
guys?
I put him in A tier.
Okay.
Bottom of A tier. I think everything else there is better than he is. I have 2 in my list. So talking about Kodaz, his CP regen ability, I think a more relevant CP regen ability in the army is the Inquisitor. When you target the Inquisitor's unit with a stratagem on a 3-up, you get a CP back. It's something you can control, and you're putting them in units where you want to be spending CP on stratagems. The Imperial Navy Breachers want to be using grenades. They want to be using the +1 strength, +1 AP. They want to be using the reactive move with the 4-up Invuln. These are all stratagems. They want to be advancing and shooting, rapid ingress, whatever it is that they want to be doing. You have reasonable opportunities to get your CP back. And this model has like a random dev wound flamer that's like genuinely really strong.
It's pretty good.
So it's 2d6 Torrent, 2d6, 18-inch range, strength 3, AP 2, damage 1 with dev wounds.
Yeah, I'm fine with that. That's fine. And for
Which
55 points.
Yeah, for 55 points. And you get 4 attacks at 5, strength 5, AP 2, D3 damage in combat. It's just like decent profiles, and you get a random combi weapon on top of it. That it's an AP2 combi weapon, which I don't know how often that actually ends up mattering, but sure. Sometimes your combi weapon is AP2 when you wound something.
Nice. I agree. I think that's a great pick. Probably holds enhancements pretty well as well.
Yeah, holds enhancements pretty well in some of the detachments. There's nothing really interesting to put on it in Imperialis fleet. 2 of the enhancements in that detachment are locked to Voidfarers, and the Inquisitor is not. But the other thing that I think really pushes the Inquisitor over the edge is when you put them in Imperial Navy breachers, they get access to 4 rerolls to wound.
So with that flamer, it's really good.
Yes. So now you can either fish for the dev wounds, or you can also spend the 1 CP for +1 strength, +1 AP, and now you have a strength 4 AP3 flamer with 4 rerolls to wound and ignore cover from the Imperial Navy breachers again. Like it legitimately does good damage when you point it at something.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm just a big fan. Big fan of the Inquisitor. I see a lot of people look at it and they just kind of assume it's bad, but I mean, you really can't underestimate the dev wound flamer when it has 4 rolls to wound. It like the damage margins are so narrow for this army, and you gain just a little bit extra, for 55 for like nothing to include this guy to put it in a unit you're already planning on taking.
Absolutely. All right, who do we have up next?
This is the Inquisitorial Henchmen, I think is what they're called. No, Inquisitorial Agents. Sorry. This unit is a shell of its former self. I think they're bottom of C tier. The only real interesting thing I think you can do with them is you take a max 12-man squad and you put 2 multi-meltas in them and then shove them in a chimera and run around blasting 2 multi-meltas out of the firing deck of the chimera. But aside from that, I have nothing really positive to say about the unit. They used to be 2 wounds, now they only have 1. You used to be able to give them a bunch of like different special rules, like 12-inch deep strike denial and +1 to wound for all your guns and ranged, which Draxis really liked to be a part of. And I think there were a couple other. You used to be able to give them all a 5 of Inmol and, a couple things like that. But they lost all of that. They lost a wound each, and they're not really cheaper than they were before.
Yeah.
So I just there's nothing really that compels me to want to take this unit.
Yeah, and it sounds like you have so many other units that kind of just do the same thing but better. Anyway.
Exactly. Yeah. Exactly.
So, Chimera, you did mention the Chimera there.
Yes. The only unit the Chimera can take is the Inquisitorial Agents.
So we do this.
So yes, exactly. And there's nothing more really needs to be said. For all the same reasons that I don't love the Inquisitorial Agents, it just extends to the Chimera.
That's tough. Dang. Okay.
All right.
What we have next up, is this the Priest?
Unistorm Priest, yes. So Unistorm Priest is really held back by what he can lead. There's nothing in what he can lead that wants his buff. His buff is sustained hits 1 in combat, which Subductors, which are coming up, are the only thing that really cares about that. But let's not kid ourselves. They have 2 attacks at 4/1/1. They're not killing anything in combat, and sustained hits 1 isn't going to change that. And then once per game, he can kind of be a little better in combat, but he's still only AP1, and he still only hits on 4s with no access to rerolls. If you could join him to Deathwatch veterans, and he had like one of the riders that said you can attach him even if, already another character's already attached. I think he's great. He's 40 points. You spend 40 points to give your Deathwatch hammers sustained hits all the time. I'm probably doing that, but
that would be
he can't
incredible.
join them, and it just doesn't. He doesn't have that. That's where I'm inhaling the copium there for that. But right now, I just think there's not really a reason to take him. He is a model for 40 points, and that does have value.
An Immolator?
No, I wouldn't put him better than an Immolator. I'd put him better than the I'd put him better than the Chimera for the Inquisitorial agents, but not better than the agents themselves. That's where I think.
Hovering right near the bottom of C tier. Okay.
Yeah.
Yep. Next up, we have. I like this guy. Have you ever played Subnautica? Have you played that game?
I have, yes.
So like the big Leviathan dragon or whatever.
Yes. Yeah.
That's this guy. His face.
I can see it. Yeah. It has that look to him.
So the Navigator, is he navigating his way up to any good tier?
To A tier. I think he navigates up to A tier. But we'll put him between the two assassins. I think he ends up having a place more than the Culexus, but not as much as the Eversor. So he does a couple things pretty fundamental. One thing is he's a Voidfarer character, so he carries the enhancements for Imperialis fleet, and he does it cheaper than the Rogue Trader entourage. He's 60 points versus their 75 for the squad. But the other thing that he does that I think is more important is he has at the start of the shooting phase, you pick an enemy unit, and importantly at the start of the shooting phase, which means you get an opportunity to like move and advance and then use it. So the fact that it's only 12-inch range means that you're still able to use it. You're not locked to doing it at the start of your turn before you get a chance to move. You point at something you can see and you say, take a battle shock test. And if you're infantry, you have -2 to the test, which pushes it to the realm where it's pretty consistent that they fail.
Dude, he's like a Neurolictor, man.
Yeah, he's a Neurolictor for 60 points. But they also just take 3 mortal wounds for failing the test.
Yeah, no, I really like him as well.
Yeah. So the thing that I really like about him that I think is pretty fundamental to how this army plays. This army has like damage in very specific places. This isn't an army that can like go wide and kill you with like this unit's going to kill this and this unit kills this and this. They're not playing that game. They're doing like, okay, I'm using my turn, putting my units together to kill this thing in your army, and I'm like moving around and holding objectives and like doing things in other places. But like this thing dies, and so you can't really afford to miss when you commit to go kill something. So having the navigators in your list lets you turn off their defensive stratagems. So you have AOC predominantly is one that you want to be looking at, but then you also have interrupts. You have -1 damage in combat, which is a big deal for the Deathwatch veterans. There's a lot of things that your opponent wants to be using when you start connecting, but then you come out with these guys and you say, they're battle shocked. You can't use that stratagem. One big example is like Deathwing Knights. You go out to shoot at some Deathwing Knights. This army is made of like a lot of AP 1 and 2 shooting. They want to be pressing the AOC button when you step out to go look at them. They're battle shocked. You can't use AOC, and you also took 3 mortal wounds for your troubles. So I think they help really add to the consistency of the army's damage output. I run them solo by themselves, 60 points. They run around. They also have they have a 12-inch deep strike denial aura.
Oh, that's probably why.
Yeah, so they kind of run around by themselves in the backfield until it's time for them to run up and start, pointing at things they really hate. I really like them. I think I think they're quite good in the army. They carry the enhancements, which is something you need to be doing anyways, and then they also just have good rules that help the army function.
Excellent. We've got next up. These are the Rogue Trader, right?
Yes, this is Rogue Trader Entourage. I put them top of B tier, maybe bottom of A, but I think top of B. They're also Voidfarers. It's a character unit where every model has a 4-up invulnerable save, which is valuable by itself. They give the unit their leading infiltrate, and they let you redeploy D3 battle line Imperium units. This is another unit that I wish I had in my list, but I don't have the points for.
Right.
Again, I like might have had one of them, but the Navigators were cheaper, so I had a unit of Navigators instead. They also give the unit they join resurrect D3 models. So I think their best place is joining a unit of Imperial Navy Breachers.
I can see that.
You know, the extra 4-up invulns, you start resurrecting models. They do a job and they do it pretty well. You have some random weapons in there that can do some damage depending on what it is you're looking at. But yeah, I think they're kind of solid. Like they do a lot of things, and I care about the things that they do. And they do it pretty cheap. So yeah, I like them. I think they're decent.
Nice. About it. Okay. So we've got Sisters of Battle. If I were to take a guess, probably not super high on them, right?
No, not super high. I'm gonna put them bottom of B tier. So once again, OC2, they're not battle line in this detachment. They don't get battle line, or not in this book. They don't get it, but they're still OC2. They still sticky objectives. They get a command reroll stratagem once a game for free on the Cherub, which is, something. I like the Sisters more than the Immolator. I can see situations where I'd be taking a sister squad without an Immolator.
Yeah. Well, because you could have a sister squad and a Rhino, correct? And then after your sisters jump out, there's still the potential, maybe slim, but there's still the potential that your other units could benefit from the Rhino, even the sisters are out.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. But they don't have like miracle dice. They don't have like really strong stratagem support or detachment support from the sisters normally get. So.
Right. You do still get a multi-melta and a melta gun, and you can make those +1 to hit with the detachment.
Okay.
So like they have some meltas that you care about. And that is one thing that I do think is interesting. If you're looking at like really trying to pop bigger vehicles, they're very swingy about it, but you can, put the Inferno Pistol multi-melta melta gun in an Immolator with the Cherub, and you like go forward and jump out, and now you have the twin multi-melta on the Immolator itself plus random melta weapons from the inside, and they like shoot at something, and maybe they kill it.
That's not terrible.
That is something you do. It's not terrible.
I feel like you can also do that combo with like the Navy Breachers and stuff.
Yeah, and again, they're doing it for 200 points. For both of those. Now, granted, you do get the extra smaller sister squad that can go sit on your home field and sticky it. So like, I don't hate the sister squad. I think they're better than the Immolator. And the Immolator also makes them better because you split them in half, and then you get the random 5-man squad that stickies your home field and spreads out and can do actions and, screens and everything. But I still don't love them. I would rather have... actually, I think put them above the Vigilance. I think I'd rather have them over a Vigilance squad.
Okay.
Probably. But
I can see it.
But yeah,
splitting the squad is pretty sweet.
Yeah.
I can see that. Here we go. We've got well, most importantly, there's a dog
Subductors.
Here.
Yes. So Subductors, I think, go into A tier just above the basic Inquisitor. So Subductors are another Space Cops data sheet. They have a 4-up invuln base and a 3-up armor base, and they're 85 points for 10. Wow. And that is the extent of why I really like them. They're
Agreed.
dirt cheap, and they're durable. You can infiltrate them in Imperialis fleet. It's a 11 man squad because of the dogs, so you can spread out pretty far for screening. You have to dedicate real guns to be able to kill them. You can't just kill them with nonsense because they have a 3-up base save and a 4-up Inmoln. They're just decent across the board for super low cost.
Yep, that sounds
for what
very
you're getting.
annoying. And the fact that
Yeah.
they infiltrate with 11 models in the squad
Yes.
is actually huge. You can probably screen out the entire battlefield, or at least
just about
like 80% of No Man's Land, probably within 11 man.
Yep.
Are you running a squad of these, Charlie?
I'm running 2.
Whew. So I bet if you win the roll off for deployment, your first move.
Oh. If my opponent also has infiltrators, or even in some cases, where they don't have infiltrators, they spread out across the middle of the table and say, you know what, you can't infiltrate anywhere. Or if I'm playing against like World Eaters or something, they sit in front of it. They're like the last drop, and they go in front of where all my opponent's models are.
And how many points were they again?
85 for the 11 man squad.
Oh my gosh, I love those guys.
Yeah, and again, I can't understate how important it is that they have a 3-up armor save base. It makes them legitimately so hard to remove to just like trash random guns like Stormbolters, random bolt guns, random like AP1 pistols that your opponent points at them, heavy bolters, things like that. They still get a 3-up save and cover, which makes them just so much more annoying to remove than your opponent wants them to be. And then they find themselves in situations where it's like, well, I just dedicated like 600 points of my army shooting to kill these 10 models. And like sometimes, maybe I didn't do it because I have a 4-up involved and they're still sitting there. And I'm like, this sucks.
4-up involves are very, very swingy.
Very swingy.
But what's not swingy is a dude with a big sniper rifle.
What's not swingy, man? This guy's got BS2, but misses half the time. This is the 50-50 Vindicare. I think he goes bottom of B tier. Yeah. He has value because he's an assassin. Because he's lone op, because he has deep strike. He has decent rules. If he gets to see your opponent's character, sorry, he doesn't have deep strike. He has infiltrator. If he gets to see your opponent's characters, he probably kills them.
Yep. And that's kind of all he does, right? He's gonna kill
but that's
a character once per game, and And how many points is he though?
He is more so if you're talking about allies, he's 150, which just boggles the mind. I don't even want to begin to try and understand where that rationale came from. But in codex, he's 110, so he's more expensive than the Calidus and the Culexus, but he's the same cost as the Eversor.
I feel like probably for good reason, all of the assassins immediately, because they're assassins, get at least 100 points as their unit. And I don't, I'm not going to really argue that the Vindicare maybe should be sub 100, but 100 points does kind of feel like the point where you're like, do I really need this guy?
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah. And so the reason why he's not like C tier or lower is because there are some matchups where he is valuable, and because you're playing pure agents, you can just swap to him if you need to.
I feel like if you're up against Necrons and they just send out their Lich Guard blob kind of willy-nilly, there's a pretty good chance he can pick off the the Technomancer pretty easy.
Yeah, like against a lot of Necron lists, Awakened Dynasty lists are a big example because you really want those characters leading. Even there's a lot of situations where you will want to have a Vindicare, but for like killing a character once per game, a lot of the times I look at it and I'm like, I'd probably rather just have an Eversor because he still forces where my opponent can move to, but he projects much more threat because the Vindicare goes and sits somewhere and is like, okay, your characters can't exist in this narrow space where I'm looking. The Eversor is like, your characters can't exist within reasonably within like 21 inches of me, because at any point I can just blitz, go, kill them.
Right. Yep. Agreed.
So sometimes he has value. Most of the time, I think he's bad. But because you're playing agents, you can take him and not feel bad about it, because you can swap to him when the time arises. So it's funny, how I built my list, I chose the Vindicare and the Culexus in my list. But so I'll just end up using the ability most games to swap both of them out to be other ones.
Nice. That is a very cool ability. I like that. That's awesome.
Yeah.
We've got these guys.
Yeah, these guys, the Navy, the Voidsmen, the Voidsmen in arms. They've been a staple ally unit for a very long time, and now it's their time to be part of the Imperial Agents. I think I want to put them in A tier, and I think I actually want to bump the Navy Breachers up to S and have them take the Navy Breachers' place at the top of it.
Wow, really?
Maybe not at the top. Let's look at it a little more. We'll put them next to the Navigator, above the Culexus, though. Under the Navigator, above the Culexus, I think is where he ends up. Yeah. So they're 50 points for 6 models. You can give them Deep Strike in Imperialis fleet, and they're OC2. They don't Deep Strike, or not Deep Strike. They don't. They're not battle lines, so you can only take 3 squads. And they don't do any damage. Don't expect them to do any damage ever. They're not here to do damage. They're not here to scare your opponent. They're here to score points. And they do that very well, and they're very cheap for it, and then they can like screen afterwards. There's something that I think you need to play the game with this army. And so I think you're never not including them in your army.
Right. Yeah. So I mean, just one of those units that's like, yeah, you're just gonna have them because.
Yeah, exactly. Because there's 50 points. Like you can find 50 points in your list to put like up.
Yep.
Right. You're never gonna finish a list and be like, oh man, I have no Imperial, Voidsmen at arms. They how did they not make it? You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah. I love it. We've got 2 more units. This first one is the named Watchmaster. Is that correct?
Yeah, so not even a master. He's a watch captain.
Ooh.
So we have watch captain Artemis, and I think he goes firmly top of B tier.
Okay.
So he's dirt cheap. He's 65 points for a Space Marine, a 4-wound Space Marine captain, which is kind of funny. I don't know why he's not 5 like the rest. He has a little funny flamer that'll sometimes be funny and go kill something. I think his value is best served solo. One of his abilities is after he dies, he stands back up on a 2-up. He does only stand up with 1 wound remaining, which means you could fail a battle shock and go to OC0. But what I really like that you can do with him is you draw like cleanse or something. You have him staged up behind a wall. He walks out, he cleanses an objective. Your opponent shoots and kills him while he's on the objective. He stands back up at the start of your turn. He stands up on the objective, still holds it, scores primary for another turn.
That's where I think good.
That's where I think his value is. And because you're playing Imperialis fleet, you're not really scared about him failing the battle shock, because you can pick the objective he's standing on to be your +1 OC, +1 leadership, 5-up Inmol objective. So now he's only failing the battle shock on a 1 through 4 because he becomes leadership 5+. And even if you fail, he still is OC1 because it reduces to 0, and then you add 1 for being in range of the objective, so he still holds it.
Oh, incredible. I didn't realize that
is how that interaction works. Yep. So you can run out, get a secondary, have him die, and guarantee that he'll still hold the point as long as your opponent doesn't send something onto it. But then at that point, you've spent 65 points to force your opponent to go send something to stand on this objective, or I will still hold it and score primary for another turn. And all you had to commit was 65 points and watch Captain Artemis.
Yep. And then your Deathwatch or your Navy Breachers or
Right.
whatever can come
Yeah.
out and hit.
Whatever. Exactly. Whatever unit is you have that's like behind the corner with a brick, ready to smack your opponent with is just waiting there. Yeah.
Incredible. Yeah, I like it. He sounds like a high skill ceiling unit, but I think you're right. I think he's got
Yeah.
some tricks.
Hey,
Last, but certainly not
yeah.
least.
Certainly not least, we have the generic Watchmaster. So this unit changed very slightly from the Deathwatch Index. So they lost the Vect Aura, which I'm totally fine with because we have the Calidus, not even a little worried about it, and gained the free strat ability that Space Marine captains have, which is really good because there's a lot of stratagems that you want to be using on your Deathwatch veterans, and you absolutely have this guy in your list leading Deathwatch veterans. He has a 2-up save base, so he's just kind of a little better off the bat than like a normal Space Marine captain. His spear is lance, so when you charge, you're already +1 to wound. He carries the buffs from the squad really well, so they have rerolls to hit, 1 to hit natively and 4 rolls to hit against Xenos. He really loves having that. You can give him sustained hits. He you give him the you join him to the Deathwatch veterans, and now they get the 4-up Inmolator and reactive move. And he gives the squad advance, fallback, shoot, and charge. So they're always activating all the time. So you can't tag them and like stop them from doing stuff. You can't stand a little farther away because they're still gonna get out of the Rhino advance and then charge you. He's a phenomenal force multiplier for the unit. He can carry some of the enhancements, which if you need to, he's there for it. He hits decently hard. He's pretty durable with a 2-up save. And the free strat, this army has so many like CP manipulation abilities. You get the Vectora from the Calidus. Kodaz can give you CP. The basic Inquisitor can give you CP. There's an enhancement in Imperialis fleet that makes stratagems cost less, like specific stratagems cost less. And then you have this guy that makes stratagems cost less. So you can go into a turn with like 4 CP, use 3 stratagems, and still have 4 CP at the end of your turn.
Yeah, that's that's pretty disgusting.
If you're putting your stratagems in the right places. So I think he comes in. I think he comes in at S tier, right next to the Deathwatch veterans. Just because he does so much for that unit, and since you're already taking that unit, you are going to be taking this guy, and he just makes the unit so much better. And I don't think there's really a world where you're running the 10-man squads and not taking him. And again, specifically in the context of Imperialis fleet, the strongest stratagem in this book, hands down, no question, is the 6-inch reactive move, 4-up Invuln. I've mentioned it a lot over the course of the tier list. That stratagem is so phenomenally powerful. It like gives your opponent so many things they have to think about, because any of your units with a character that you like offer to them exist in this like kind of half solid state where they could be within 6 inches anywhere of where they currently are.
Yeah, which is I mean, even the threat of that activation is enough to force your opponent to make a bad decision. So I love that.
Exactly.
And then when you get to do it for free, sheesh.
Yeah.
That's very good, man.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, Charlie, I want to thank you so much for hanging out and
yeah,
chilling on the
absolutely.
channel.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah,
It was a pleasure.
Yeah, man, it was a great conversation. Dylan, every single time I do one of these, he tells me to plug the live stream at the beginning of the video, and I forget. So here's when I will plug our live stream. Every Wednesdays, we do really, really good battle reports. We have lots of fun.
It's
in addition
great
to
content.
thanks. In addition to all the kind of tactic stuff that I've been doing, come out and hang out with us. Charlie's in chat every single time, and he's promised me that he's going to stay through the duration of every single stream from here
every
on
single
out.
stream, every single time.
Yep.
It doesn't matter what my family's doing. I'm gonna be there.
Yep, he is. So come say hey to Charlie, and thanks again, Charlie. And I
Absolutely.
will.
And if just for what it's worth, if you're interested in seeing the agents, in play, there's a chance hopefully soon I'll be on stream with the agents.
Yes, I would love that. And I wouldn't know what you were doing the whole time until you hit me with that break.
Until it happens, the break.
All right. Thanks again, Charlie. And
Thank you.
I'll
Jordan.
see everybody Wednesday.
Bye-bye.